So that's the Tyrian silver coin. And Jesus then is asked, according to the Mishnah, which is a 2nd century AD Jewish source of how to live out the Jewish law, Talmud, it's late Second Temple Judaism, if the Sanhedrin condemned a criminal to death, even under Roman law, it was on the Sanhedrin to bury the crucified criminal. What do we see in the juridical procedure in the Gospels? We see that Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, 2 members of the Sanhedrin, take control of burying Jesus' body. Mm-hmm. That is consistent with what the Mishnah says. And so they don't have much time, and they take Jesus to a new tomb in a quarry, a rock-hewn tomb. So this is not a tomb that has been used before by a family. It's a brand new tomb. We have this 3D printed model right here. This is fascinating. This is so fun, too. So, Glenn, I've had the opportunity to film at all the resurrection sites of Jesus and Lazarus in Jerusalem. I've been in more tombs than probably anyone you've ever interviewed. Most Jewish tombs look like our hand. You walk into the tomb, and you usually walk down the steps. Mm-hmm. It's usually just a meter square, because not a lot of rich people got buried in the land of Israel. And so when you see this large circular stone, that's a crucial key. This is a rich person's tomb. They've got a big stone, because 80% of the tombs that we've discovered in the land of Israel are just a meter square. They're small. But when you would get inside your palm of your hand, that's where you would pray, you would mourn the dead, and then the finger slots are niches for the bodies to be buried. So the Jewish family burial would happen.
And there's only one niche in this.
Right. There would have been more originally. Joseph would have had more. I have stood, and I am convinced, based on the archaeology, based on all of the evidence, and I write about this in my book, Body of Proof, at length, that the edicule inside of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is, in fact, the place where Jesus was buried.
My sticking point on this is the mother of Constantine, who's like, yes, that is the place.
Yeah, I mean, she picked out the church, too, at Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity.
So, what were her credentials?
Absolutely.
So, but I've been to both places. I've been to the Garden Tomb and to the place that she says. And I mean, I have no idea.
Right.
Tell me the evidence that is the tomb.
This is really fascinating. I want you to hold another coin, okay? Because this will answer your question.
Okay.
Coins were like the social media of the 1st and 2nd century. They would tell you who is in power, what the name of the city is, and what cultural sensitivities you needed to be aware of. After 3 Jewish revolts in the 1st and early 2nd century, Hadrian has had enough of the Jews. And he demolishes Israel, and in particular Jerusalem, after the 3rd revolt, 132 to 135 AD, the Bar Kokhba, the Son of the Star revolt.
This is 60 years after the temple's gone.
Exactly. And Hadrian sees Christianity as just a Jewish sect. He wants them all dead. He renames the land of Israel Palestine. It is the reason I never use the word Palestine when referring to the Holy Land, the Jewish people, their land. Hadrian originates the term Palestine, and he does so very pejoratively. I was actually flying in an airline. This is anecdotal recently. I fly with American Airlines, but I was on one of their One World partners. I'm flying over the land of Israel. It doesn't say Israel anywhere on the flight map. It says Palestinian territories, as an echo back to Hadrian. So Hadrian demolishes Israel. He renames Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina, and that bronze coin that you hold in your hand from the 2nd century says it's stamped with Hadrian Aelia Capitolina. This is the new name for the city of Jerusalem.
Wow.
When Hadrian demolishes and razes Jerusalem in the 2nd century, he hears about this venerated site of this dying and rising God, and he absolutely demolishes it. He puts in a temple to the god Venus, and then where Jesus is crucified, another venerated object to Jupiter, and Hadrian unwittingly becomes the protector of this sacred Christian site of Jesus' death by Roman crucifixion and his resurrection. Because people didn't move around a lot, Glenn. If you would have lived in the 1st and 2nd century, you would have said, oh, you would have taken your kids there and said, hey, this is where he died.
Right.
Ignore the Venus thing. It's like our liberals today who want to demolish our history.
Right.
This is where it happened. This is where Gettysburg happened.
Right.
We can call it whatever we want now, but this is where Jesus died. This is where he was raised from the dead. And so that's 200 years before Helena. The archaeology is that good. And then when you see in 2017, the tomb is open for a remodeling, really a refurbishment is what we should call it, because it's falling apart. And the limestone is all first century. And so it's a rock quarry. And I have filmed in the very edicule. And I know that everything seems wrong about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It seems like it's outside the city. Well, Agrippa expanded the city walls in 44. When's Jesus crucified? 33. So you're following with me, the archaeology. And I love a word about the Garden Tomb. I love it. Anytime I lead tours, it's peaceful. We take communion there. It's fabulous. But even the director of the Garden Tomb knows that that's not the historical site.
Golgotha, place of the skull.
Yes.
That's another thing about the Garden Tomb. It looks like a skull right there above the bus stop.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well
but
done.
That's not where he was.
Yeah. It's too far away. It's too early. The tomb, specifically, I should mention, the tomb is about 700 years earlier than the time of Jesus. And so it's much too old to be Jesus's tomb. We know that to be true, based again on the archaeology.
I think science and God go hand in hand. God's got to be the greatest scientist and mathematician of all time.
Yes.
I mean, everything is math. Everything is science, And I don't believe that he works outside of that.
Right.
He can't, or the whole thing would collapse. You know what I mean? He created the rules. He plays within the rules. If he's resurrecting and there is energy that's coming in like that, you would think that there would be the flash. It would leave evidence.
Yes.
So this isn't a miracle as much as it is just a marker of God.
That's right.
Doing something.
That's right.
Scientifically.
That's right. Exactly.
So this is not something that God did so we'd have faith. This is just one piece of evidence that, it happened.
That's right.
But it's not. Do you see this as a faith thing or just evidence that it happened?
That's such a great question. I see this as a living gospel. Faith is always defined by its object. We don't have faith in faith. We have faith based on evidence. And so I see it as yet another evidential layer of the greatest event of human history, Jesus' death and resurrection on our behalf on the cross. So I see it as just another layer of very important evidence. It's the only historical evidence we have of the resurrection outside of the New Testament
I've been to
scriptures.
several places that have the cross.
Yeah. We could build a forest of all those relics. So truly, it's the only, and it doesn't, this is as close as your audience, and I'm so thankful to you doing this in your studio. This is as close as any of us will ever get to the shroud today. Because
I've wanted to go to Turin my whole life.
Even this year in the Jubilee, we're not sure if it's even going to be on display. Why? Some youth locally, and it's all up to the Archbishop of Turin. So we need
they have the technology to keep it safe.
Oh,
was this ever more vibrant than it is now?
We only can speculate. We don't know that it was ever more vibrant, but we do know that it is degrading based on that waxus.
Okay.
We know that the fibers itself are degrading. We don't know about the image. The image has always been faint. That and again, Secondo Pia didn't even see this till 1898. 1898 is the point at which Secondo Pia, a lawyer, takes a photograph of the shroud, and in the negative, he sees it and says, "Oh my God!" And that kicks off modern science.
But it was in the church.
It was in the Turin Church, correctly, in 1898.
But it was in a box.
It was on display, and he had to build an scaffolding to take, and it was one of the first photographs ever taken with a flash, with electricity. The church had no electricity, by the way, and so he takes it with flash photography. The exposure takes hours, literally. For the benefit of anyone under the age of 30, our phones did not always take pictures.
Right, yeah. I mean, you still had a phone, don't get me wrong, but it didn't have a camera with it.
It didn't take pictures. You had to use camera.
Right.
You had to go in the dark room.
Right.
He goes, and that kicks off. So for 125 years now, we've enjoyed modern scientific study of the shroud, and all of it smacks of authenticity, not forgery. Glenn, if I'm putting up on your table right now all the evidence for and all the evidence against the Shroud of Turin scientifically, there's one shred of evidence against it, the erroneous 1988 carbon dating, and then a absolute deluge of evidence by scientists, not theologians, not pastors, hoping that it is.
Most pastors and theologians,
they discredit this.
Right.
And I say to evangelicals who are watching, don't be conditioned as I was to think, oh, this is some Catholic relic. Read it, study it, read from people like me and Glenn and others who actually look at the science. We look at the reports. We learn from everyone, but we don't let anyone think for us.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian thinker, and so I follow the evidence where it leads. And too bad I was conditioned in England to not believe in it either. I've now become
It's a mistake
convinced.
to think that just because Catholics, I mean, I grew up Catholic. I have nothing against Catholics at all. I love them.
Yeah.
But you're conditioned to think, oh, it's Catholic. So the one thing, I was actually given permission to go into the secret archives
in the Vatican Library?
So I went in with the chief theologian and the head of the archives. I was in there for like 3 hours.
Wow.
It is, I mean, I don't know how I got the invite. I honestly don't. The theologian who is the one who consults with the Pope and says, okay, theologically, he was with me in the first room we were in. I said, what is this room? And he said, I don't know. I've never been allowed past that door. But the things that I saw, the things that they have, the Vatican Museum is just the surface of what they have. I'm walking in a hallway, and the head of the Vatican Archives says, oh, we passed something, past this big box. And he's like, oh, wait. Mm-hmm. Turns around, goes back and says, you'll love this. Opens the doors. And it is the parchment with all of the wax seals saying that King Henry VIII should be, they should be pardoned and, his marriage annulled. Wow. And that was just in a hallway that they were like, just because they have it doesn't make it Catholic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But you've just explained one of the big pitfalls that many Christians who hear about the Shroud of Turin, they don't seem to care. They think, oh, that's a relic, that's not science, that's not real, there's no evidence. And when I have yet to be with someone and give all the evidence to where it doesn't immediately invite them into the mystery of the shroud, because when you get beyond the mystery, you hear the message of the shroud, which is God and his love for us in the most radical ways.